That joke isn't funny anymore. Available on Amazon and everywhere. Welcome back to the Lou Perez podcast. I'm your host, Lou Perez, and I am joined by Exulansic, who you may recognize because this is her second time on my podcast. And I'm very fortunate to have her back. It's been a while since we last spoke. I think a lot has happened in the world. In your own life, I hope good things have happened on your end, Sierra. So.
I've had some interesting. I think I was on your show in 2022, right?
I think so.
It's been an interesting couple of years for sure.
Yeah,
lots of news, lots of twists and turns, lots of side quests.
Yeah,
dramas.
So the big thing is right off the bat, I want people to know where they can follow your stuff because I've been seeing a lot of your stuff on Odyssey. Is that where you want people to check out your work?
Odyssey is the biggest archive. So Exulansic.com points to Odyssey. And they can also find it on Rumble. I've started to upload to Twitter as well.
Mm-hmm. So, for those who might not be, familiar with your stuff, I think one of the topics that you talk about a lot is deals with like transgenderism and what impact has, that subject or, covering that subject had on your reach when it comes to social media, because I hear a lot of stories about people getting dinged, particularly on like YouTube and, things just not being able to go out and people seeing it.
Yeah, no, my content definitely has been suppressed since I started talking about the subject. Originally, I was on TikTok, mostly just talking about linguistics. And then I started talking about this and getting attention for it. And very quickly, my original TikTok was banned back in 2021, actually, like very early on. And yeah, I've run into trouble on other platforms too for just, and like, they don't necessarily tell you what video it was. Like on YouTube, you're supposed to get like a strike system, but that didn't happen for me. It just got taken out.
And how'd you like, save all your content? Because I feel like, I mean, if I look back on my YouTube page, it was, hundreds of videos. And like, if that was to go away, I'm like, ooh, do I have that backed up anywhere?
Well, you can set up Odyssey and Rumble to crawl your YouTube and automatically back up everything. So most of the videos that were backed up prior to that were just automatically backed up. Got it.
And over the I guess we're coming up on 2 years since we last spoke. What are some of the greatest hits on your end? What have you made the most noise or uproar with?
Well, last summer I had a clip that went pretty viral. That was from I Am Jazz, which is a show about Jazz Jennings, who is a adult now who was transitioned as a child, first socially in like preschool, and then medically starting at puberty, and then surgically when he was 17, and then a few times after that to revise it because unsurprisingly it didn't go well to get a vaginoplasty. And so that clip went kind of viral and was showing up on different conservative outlets, some of which were editing me out and other ones my face were still flashing up on the screen at the end because they didn't fully edit it. It was from my reaction videos, which is called I Am Jazz's Waking Nightmare. And so now I'm going back and I'm going through the first season so that we can draw some comparisons with how it ended. And it's just, the show doesn't bottom out. It's just awful. Every single episode is horrible in a new and exciting way.
How many seasons are there of I Am Jazz?
There's 8, unless they've started the 9th one recently. Yeah. But I haven't heard of that.
Hey, yeah, I remember, with the jazz thing, the I Am Jazz thing seems to be a perfect example of something that's not supposed to be happening. With this issue, it's one thing with adults, transgender adults, deciding to, undergo hormone treatment or surgery. And it's another thing when you're involving children. But, throughout, I've always been told, well, oh, don't worry, it's not, no child is going through this stuff. And yet you have an 8-season arc following a child that went through this. What do you make of that?
They just lie. And so if you challenge them and list examples of children who've been medically transitioned, who've been cut and drugged so that they can, I call them trying to make a bonsai child, because they're trying to stunt their development and keep them in a certain way. And then they go in and give them the cross-sex hormones to try to make them cosmetically look like it. So it's horrific because of the the rules about unintended consequences. We don't really know what we're doing when we use medicine to correct pathology. Then we kind of know where we're aiming, but they're not correcting anything here. Their goal is to make the child think that they're happy with the outcome, and otherwise make them kind of breed them like a dog to look like a certain way without regard for the health impacts.
Yeah. The Cass report that came out, do you know about that, or can you explain kind of to the layman what that revealed?
So the Cass report was written by, I believe first name is Hillary Cass. She's a pediatrician, and she wrote about basically the evidence basis for puberty blockers, and kind of came up with that they didn't have a lot of support behind them.
So, when we hear about, puberty blockers, I've heard like a lot of people say like, oh, it's just to, give like a temporary pause on puberty so that the child can decide, whether or not they want to, continue, down that road, or if they want to, go and do, actually go through puberty. I mean, is it reversible? Like, can you just get off these things and be like, oh, you're back to being a on your way to being a football linebacker?
These medications, and anytime you're messing with development, you can't really reverse it. There's no getting back the premorbid state. Anytime you take a psychoactive drug, like you are changing yourself, even if you go off it later. There's plenty of examples of people getting medication acquired syndromes and being stuck with them. And so puberty blockers are marketed as something that's just a pause button, just reversible. That's largely based on the fact that they're used in precocious puberty to delay puberty to the normal time. And then the children are allowed to go through puberty at the normal time. But that doesn't mean it's consequence free even for them. It's still something where they're going to potentially develop issues that they wouldn't have developed if they hadn't been on the drug. And so one of the classic examples is of a non-reversible problem is, you're giving them a drug that is preventing their growth plates from fusing by getting rid of the estrogen. And this makes them grow taller. And if they get to a certain size, what can happen is that those growth plates, which are not fused in the normal way because you've suppressed the estrogen, they actually, the weight applied to them on the femoral cap, which kind of looks like this, and then in the socket, but the cap is made of two pieces, and that cap will actually slip. And then the cure for that is actually to take a big screw and just try to screw them together, and then the kid just has a bone screw forever at that point. So it's just like, how do you reverse that? That's a direct consequence of the fact that they were growing while their levels of bone mineralization hormones were not flowing in the normal way. And so then you look at the gender issues. They're not delaying puberty that's starting early to the normal time. They're delaying puberty starting at the normal time indefinitely, and then giving them a mimicry of the cross-sex hormones that does not involve several hormones that are being produced by the brain that do things in the body besides mature the gonads.
So on that, so you were describing like the hip itself. Yeah. So you were talking about earlier, you made the analogy to like breeding dogs, in a way. And I know that there are certain like dog breeds where like, I think it was like, might have been bulldogs. I had a bulldog as a kid. And I think one of the many issues they had for the more purebred it was, like they would have like hip slips and that sort of
dysplasia.
thing. Yeah. So like,
and they've bred spina bifida into a dog breed called a Rhodesian Ridgeback. And so in trying to give it this ridge, they accidentally like made it way more likely to have like fistulas going into the spine or full on spina bifida.
Oh my God. It sounds like well, that sounds awful.
Yeah.
To do that.
Poor doggy.
For a poor dog.
Right. Because we're applying selection pressures to them that are not natural, that are not like natural selection. So they end up with problems, or like the flat faced bulldogs that can't breathe because like their skin is like falling over their nose. And so they spend their lives like not really able to sleep. because they can't breathe when they're asleep. It's just awful.
Yeah. Yeah. With so, with so much of this, especially with the kids stuff, it's like, there's the obvious risks and side effects that you chance anytime you're, messing with the, endocrine system. Like, why not just let the kids just go through it and see how they're, see how they are a few, years down the road. Like the idea that, you need to undergo, hormone therapy in order to quote unquote be a girl or to be a boy, or that you need to mess with that in order to be authentically whoever you are, just seems, I don't know, it just seems like a little dangerous.
Well, yeah, if sex is not gender, I don't understand why we're changing the sex traits in order to manifest a gender. It's never really made a lot of sense to me. And we are doing this to children who are being told that if they don't disrupt their development, then they're going to have to pay for extra surgeries later to like cancel the permanent harms of going through puberty. So they have this idea that like puberty is not reversible, but suppressing puberty is. But either way, you have developmental processes happening that are not in the puberty system, but are still like affected by puberty, like bone strength.
Yeah. I think the last time you heard, we talked about the impact of puberty on the brain as well, like the brain structure and all that. And I think it's funny because I don't know if this is sort of this is on purpose, but so much of the conversation does come down to, like you say, like the gonads, secondary sex characteristics, rather than the stuff actually happening within the body. So it's like, oh, you like that girl's a guy now, so she has a beard. Like that's what I see, rather than what is going on in that person's brain. Are there any other side effects that are happening on it?
So there's research pointing to when you suppress puberty and suppress development that it can cause a measurable drop in IQ. Which makes sense, because IQ is supposed to be a quotient between where your intellectual functioning is relative to your age, and they're stunting development. So it makes sense that they would lose IQ points. In addition, the cross-sex hormone regimens have been found. These studies are more on, I think, 18 to 25-year-olds. But when you disrupt a man's hormone system, you suppress his testosterone and you give him estrogen, there's a measurable loss of brain volume. That exceeds their loss that you would expect from normal aging, because our brains do shrink as we age, and then if they shrink too much, you start having problems. And these regimens cause a measurable loss of volume, and then for females it causes an increase in volume. And of course, your brain is in a confined space, so there's only so many places it can go. And so the question is, like, at what point is this going to be proven to be able to cause these injuries? On top of that, normal puberty processes are involved, and just to let your audience know, I'm a speech language pathologist. That's my background. Mm-hmm. The normal processes involve the hypothalamus communicating with the pituitary gland, and those are both structures in the brain, in order to produce several hormones, such as follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. And then those hormones are going throughout the body to mature the gonads, but they do other stuff. So they've been implicated, dysregulation of them has been implicated in dementia processes. And so the idea that these hormones are only maturing the gonads, when we've had a gonadal system for like most of our evolutionary history, it's always been there. So it's probably been co-opted to do other stuff. It just does other stuff to do that maturational process. And so my belief is that when they stunt the development in the brain using puberty blockers, which includes Lupron, but also sometimes Depo-Provera is used for puberty suppression or gender-affirming menstrual suppression. That disruption in those intermediary hormones actually are playing a big role in the experience of sexual function, and that's why the puberty suppression is leading to lack of orgasm, lack of sexual function later, as reported by Jazz Jennings. And Marcy Bowers, the president of WPATH, has confirmed that this is just a thing that happens predictably. That we're robbing them of sexual function.
with the skull, sizing, it reminds me of the. I don't know if you ever saw Borat, but one of Borat's jokes was that he made a joke like about women having tiny brains or something, or something like that. So, no, it's just wild the implications that this is going to have, especially as you mentioned, like dementia. Are people going through dementia at an earlier age that have gone through these?
I don't know if we have that data yet.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if we have a demonstration of that, but it seems logical that's a possible outcome. And we do know that dysregulation of these hormones has been implicated in people who develop dementia for who weren't necessarily trans, but because of normal aging processes and loss of genetic fidelity, like basically your genes start accruing errors as you age, and that will disrupt the other processes. And so dysregulation of that has been connected to people having dementia processes.
Yeah.
So therefore, it does other things than just mature our gonads.
When in your field with speech pathology, has this gotten in the way of like clients? Like, if clients been like, "Oh, I don't want to work with you because of your your online presence," or anything like that?
So far, that hasn't happened to my knowledge.
Yeah.
But my opinions that I express offline or online in terms of my activism, I consider that largely separate from my clinical practice. It informs it because I have to be culturally and linguistically competent. I have to be aware of the kind of surgeries and treatments that people will be getting. And then sometimes people who take these treatments, they end up feeling like their voice has been damaged as a result of taking testosterone while female, for example. There's some intersection, but
yeah, I had Graham Linehan on. I haven't released the episode yet, but one of the things that he brought up is that the women who have undergone testosterone replacement, there's something that happens like in their voice. Not only does their voice get deeper, but it's like I'm doing a terrible job explaining it, but like there's something where their growth of their vocal cords becomes like constricted in their tiny necks.
Yeah, that's so. The female larynx is smaller than the male larynx. It's about a dime versus a nickel sized, if you're looking at the actual glottis. And so that's not a lot of space. And testosterone is an anabolic steroid. It's a muscle building steroid. It causes muscles to get larger. And you have a lot of small muscles inside the larynx that are now getting larger, including the thyrovocalis, which is the main voice muscle. And so that's a muscle that's surrounded by several layers of connective tissue called the lamina propria. And that's what's actually like waving to give you that voice. And so if inside it's like blowing up like a balloon underneath, that lamina propria, instead of being like floppy and able to move like this, now it's kind of constricted, and it's like you get that buzzing kazoo. I call it kazooicism, like a vocal quality where the voice starts sounding increasingly like a kazoo, where there's a restricted range, it's creaky, and it sounds congested. It sounds like they're trying to like speak through something that's enlarged. In addition, connective tissue structures also have hormones that are receptors for sex hormones. And so that's going to also be changing size and shape potentially. If when you take testosterone, for instance, it's going to affect cartilage turnover. Generally, my understanding is in the direction of more cartilage growth and less breakdown versus estrogen, which promotes more breakdown.
So is that where like the enlarged clitoris is? That's
where the physical changes in sizes of these structures is largely coming from either the changes in muscle size, or such as in the case of the clitoris, it's the growth of other tissues inside of a compartment. So when you have tissue growing in a compartment, it creates pressure, and if there's too much pressure on a tissue over time, that's going to cause tissue death. It's going to cause pressure necrosis, and so that's why they'll go in and do the metoidioplasty to like release the clitoris. So, but it's been described to me, and in many social media videos I've looked at as being an incredibly painful process. And I suspect it's painful because something is growing within that compartment. And there's just not room for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I credit you for taking me down some really horrific rabbit holes when it comes to the surgeries, both male to female, female male surgeries, and it's something that I definitely think doesn't get talked about enough, because it's almost like there's, I don't know if there's like this faith in science, or people see enough, like say like people with like Botox and like lip injections, and they're like, oh, this must be for every single part of your body. They must have perfected it, or perfected it in quotes.
There's this
But that's
confidence
definitely not
that
the
they wouldn't
case.
be able to sell it if it was like bad.
Yeah. And actually, I have to say, I've never seen a vaginal plasty. I think that it might just be out of my fear as a straight guy, that I might not want to see it. But I'll look
You're
at
afraid you're
dicks.
gonna like it?
Yeah, I'm afraid I'm gonna like it too much, and I'm gonna have to let my
Little
wife
Perez
know.
chaser arc.
Exactly, honey. Look, I know that you have a real one, but if we can get a fake one in there, it would just elevate things.
Well, did you hear about the White House jiggler getting accused of sexually assaulting multiple trans-identifying women, including one right after she had a phalloplasty?
No.
And the one that she assaulted.
I heard there was something, and then I saw the picture of outside the
Yeah,
White House going.
the
And I
jiggler.
gotta say, it passed. For me, like that instance, I was like, oh, I didn't realize that person was trans, but apparently I was wrong.
Yeah, but apparently that person is he's being accused of sexual violence and is apparently intact. And then the person that he admitted forcing himself on in writing in an email to her, she apparently has the setup where she's got the phalloplasty, but she's also got her original hardware.
Which is both going on?
Yeah, she's got both. She's describes it as having a rooster and a wop in her bio.
A rooster.
I don't know what I can say on your show.
A rooster.
It's a little rooster emoji. There's another word for it.
A rooster and a wop. Wow. A wop. WOP.
WAP.
Oh, WAP. Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Okay. Got it. Got it.
The wet thing.
Yeah. Is that a Cardi B thing, or is that?
Yeah, I think it's Cardi B and then somebody else. They did the song together.
Got it. A rooster and a wop. Wow. How's the rooster look? Is it?
They always kind of have this. Sometimes they'll it's just like a different color, and it looks very noticeable. Like it looks like there's a toy on you. And she's got the futon frame mode. So there's two kinds of phalloplasty, like erectile devices. There's the water balloon style, and then there's the futon frame. And the futon frame has two settings. They have couch mode and bed mode. And so it just kind of flips back and up and down. And hers apparently broke before the first time she got to use it. So now she can only use it if she like holds it.
What is that? Oh, break. Like what? Oh God.
Like, because they somehow attach it to the pubic bone. When they install it, and it broke off at the attachment to the pubic bone. So now she just like has the phallus bone that's like flopping around and it's not really attached to anything. And so she has to like hold it. She says like, I just held it like this and it worked fine. And I had so much gender euphoria. Like, okay, sure.
Because all the ones that I've seen, they look like kind of like a Mr. Potato Head. Like they look like a spud. And as someone who's been equipped with a penis for 42 years plus, I'm like, that's not what a penis looks like. I don't even know how. I mean, it doesn't seem very functional. It's almost like these people have an idea about what like feeling like a man is, or what feeling like a woman is, rather than just being, who they are. So for guys, especially like there's a comedian, a friend of mine, Robbie Bernstein, who done a lot of shows with, and he has this bit, and I know I'm going to ruin the bit, but it's basically like, if you allow boys to go through, puberty, they're never going to want to get rid of their penis, because it's just like it's such an important source of happiness and joy, and for some guys it's the only source of happiness and joy that they have in their lives. So like the idea of it's not just a physical thing, like a look, it's not just like a style, like, oh, I have a penis. It's it's, the orgasmic function there is really important, especially if you're, as you're developing. So the idea of just having like I said, like a Mr. Potato Head between your legs, I don't know. This seems like such a big disconnect.
Yeah, especially when you consider that they're taking this hunk of skin, usually from the arm, along with a nerve, and then they're going in and they're actually severing one of the two nerves that's feeding the clitoris. And when you sever a nerve from the organ that it supplies, generally you lose sensation and you lose whatever motor function there was. And if you've had an adult orgasm, you understand that there's muscle contractions that happen that are important to the overall feeling. So it seems unlikely to me that you can sever either of the nerves of the clitoris and not lose function, at least in half of it. When you sever one of the two nerves feeding the voice, you definitely lose function. The other one doesn't just magically wrap around and start to feed it. That's just not what happens, unfortunately. Maybe someday, but not today. So they're severing one of the two nerves, potentially robbing them of whatever function they had, assuming the function was retained after the bottom growth caused compression in a compartment. And then they're kind of like soldering that to the arm nerve so that the arm nerve is now stimulating the clitoral nerve when the arm skin is touched.
Wait, what? Wait. So it's like kind of connected on that level? Then?
Yeah. So they'll take the nerve that's feeding the skin, and then they'll wrap the skin up, and then they'll sew it on, and they'll also take the nerve and they'll solder it to the clitoral nerve that's now been separated from the clitoris. And so now that nerve, which was previously being supplied by an organ that was very, very specific towards enabling that kind of pleasure and reactiveness, now it's being fed by a nerve that's used to feeling the back of your arm, which is not a very erogenous or sensitive area.
No, not my thing. Not my kink. I'm not a back of the arm kind of guy. I've seen the arm, which is another like very gruesome looking thing, and I've seen the thigh as well. And that with like top surgery, I wonder if a part of this is sort of an attraction to sort of these like, I don't know, the grotesque in a way, like having that kind of scarring, that visual really jarring looking scarring, if that's a part of it. I don't know if it's like a social thing, like that they've gone through this process, and that's kind of like a form of acceptance that they've gone through it, or some other component to it.
Yeah, I think there's a component where they want that legitimacy, and for nobody to suggest that they're not really trans, and to be able to fit in with the social scene, which right now it's very trendy to have top surgery scars, and there's limitless videos of people talking about going through what I call the holy trans rite, like RITE, the holy trans rite of having your breasts removed and then picking out the first shirt you're going to wear after top surgery, the holy trans rite of having your hair cut in the masculine style for the first time, holy trans rite of going to the beach and taking your top off. Like there's a whole series of things that you can do once you've undergone that sacrament. And on top of that, there's also a lot of these girls are getting the surgery. They have very obvious self-harm scars, like all over their body, in these post-op surgery photos. So there's a degree to which people going through this may genuinely hate themselves and want to punish themselves for existing in the way that they do. And this is yet another manifestation of that, of them trying to hide from themselves in the mirror, as well as trying to cause themselves suffering and make their external self look like how they feel.
Yeah. I kind of want to, I want to bring back just breast acceptance. Like, it's like, because when you find out somebody's like cut off, completely healthy flesh, that's something to it. But like, I think breasts are very often aesthetically very pleasing. Like they could be beautiful.
I think so.
Yeah. We're both breast dudes and dudettes. but yeah, to like, yeah, like I was seeing like you have like a young couples, lesbian couples who claim that they're actually dude couples. I don't know, and
Yeah, they're gay men now.
yeah, they're gay men and they're binding their breasts stuff, and it's like in the same way we're like, if sex and gender are separate, there's no reason why you need to change your biology in order to be whatever gender you are. It's like, well, no, just be a dude with tits. Like if you think you're a dude, just be a dude with tits. Just let's make that acceptable again with this show. We'll do that.
Yeah, there's an element where they don't want to look in the mirror and see themselves. Like seeing themselves is upsetting. Either they've been through some sort of trauma, or they just feel they don't like the attention that having breasts attracted. And a lot of these girls, of course, are young, and so they haven't really had time to adjust to the fact that they now have a woman's body.
Mm-hmm.
And they're still kind of freaking out and wanting to take control back from nature, from biology, from in a sense, a lot of these girls may not be religious, but there's kind of like a developmental process where you have to be angry at God for a while and then work your shit out with God, whether you believe that there's a deity or not. I feel like that's an emotional process where you're trying to arrive at a point of acceptance of your circumstance, and acceptance that it just is. And there's a rejection of that, I think, when you're young and you're trans identifying and you don't like what puberty has done to your body, you don't like the attention it's attracted, and you're running from yourself, fundamentally. So with binding, it's marketed as some sort of like non-medical intervention,
right?
But it's kind of like a gateway, and once you start binding, that's going to only amplify how weird and dissociated you feel when you're not binding, because you're going back to your default self where you feel exposed and seen, and they don't like that. The binding, as with the bottom growth, you're creating a compartment, and so if you're doing that during development, that's going to restrict growth, and it may lead to some compartment issues, some pressure, and that may change how your breasts develop, but it may also change how the complex, like your rib cage and your spine, may develop differently because they were compressed during growth, similar to foot binding. And then that can induce pain and discomfort. And then for the person, the woman that's identifying as trans, that seems like, well, my life would be so much better if I could just get top surgery and then I wouldn't have to bind anymore. And so that's the way of selling it to them.
Yeah. And I bet after, however many months of binding, the discomfort that's going to be there, like, you get to a point you're like, well, I might as well just cut these things off because I hate the way that they feel, even though you're the one making them feel that way.
Right.
It's like, it would be kind of like, purposefully putting like a hangnail in your finger and you're like, man, this sucks. It's like, yeah, well, you keep putting a fucking hangnail in it. I've been,
have you considered not doing that?
Yeah. Have you considered, just not doing that at all? I've noticed, you talk about like, kind of like making peace with God. So I'm 42, and last year I probably weighed around 180 pounds, like 180 up to like 184, and then this year I've gotten down to I walk around kind of like a 165, which is pretty significant. Like you're talking like 15 pounds, but my head has remained the same size. So now I have like a bit like the same size head on like a thinner body, and now I need to like make peace with that. And I'm like, okay, maybe I can't chop my head off, but maybe there's something I could do. So I think I need to bulk up. So I'm a little bigger.
Get the traps going so that you look a tiny man wearing a strong man suit.
Exactly. That's what I gotta look like. Just so
there you go.
Like
There's
my
the look.
head. Yeah, my head isn't going to like, collapse my the structure of my body. But I'm willing to do that. I don't want to cut anything off, and I'm definitely not I don't know, maybe that makes me queer. I know that's a big thing. Any little thing, anybody can be queer nowadays. Yeah,
no, they definitely want people to join the club, and embrace obscuring what you are.
Yeah. Well, so one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is, the impact of all the trans stuff on dating, in particular, like, lesbian and gay dating, because I've seen like a number of people posting online, like on like lesbian, like dating sites, the dudes who put themselves on these sites. Now, some of the pictures I see, they're so ridiculous that I'm like, oh, maybe somebody's just trolling. They're just messing around, because there's like, it's like a dude who looks like me, saying that, hey, what's up? I'm 42 and a lesbian. It's like, no, you're not. You're a guy. But what has like the impact been? I don't know if you have like a personal stories with that, or friends or anything.
Yeah, I've had a couple girlfriends transition, one during and then one after we separated, and the one that was during was the one that she'd had top surgery during that, and also went on testosterone, and then started calling herself a gay man, and I found that to be, I just didn't agree with it, and then escalated to wanting to be in an HIV like trial, like a prep trial, where she wanted to be in the data set for men. It was a male data set for this drug that was preventing HIV transmission between men who were sleeping with men. Uh-huh. She wanted to be in it because she was on testosterone, so she's a man now. And they were like, no, you're a woman. You have a woman's liver. This is a drug trial. You're not going to come in. And so she just kind of threw a fit and was like trying to cancel them on Facebooks and stuff like that. And it was just like, I didn't expect it to become a big thing culturally, but that was kind of the moment where I was like, I don't know if this movement's for me. I just feel like I'm outgrowing it in a way, and versus the people who are ingrowing, I guess they're becoming more radicalized and deeper into this community and culture and ideology. So I think that it's had a big effect, because there's when you're same-sex attracted primarily or exclusively in childhood, I think that really can affect your sense of what gender you are, and gender as like a euphemism for what social role you're going to play later. Mm-hmm. And you see in media, you see depictions of love, and you identify with the male character because you want to be with the female character. You want to be the one who's doing that with the woman, and so it's confusing in that sense. And then so I think that's why it's become so popular to think about transitioning. One of the reasons, and that and just being able to kind of escape the idea that you're homosexual, that you're same-sex attracted, and pretend that you're not, that actually this is just heterosexuality with extra steps. Like, mm-hmm. I need a medical treatment to make me heterosexual. It's a transversion therapy.
So how long ago was this that your girlfriend had gone through this?
This was, I was in college. So this was around 10, 12 years ago. Mm-hmm. At this point.
Yeah. So so one of the things I've seen is I've seen a lot of like, guys who become trans women who, they say that they're women, they grow their hair out, they put makeup on, they don't do the bottom surgery, and they continue to date women, Mm-hmm. But what you're describing is someone who's lesbian, transitioned, and then insisted that they were a gay man.
Yeah, and began to date both men and women at that point.
Both men and women.
But the women that she was dating were other gay men, gay trans men. So it's a same-sex female-female relationship where both of them are saying that they're men and therefore they're gay men.
Okay.
So it's like it's a transference to where homosexuality used to be defined as like you were attracted to someone of your same sex. Now you can be homosexual if you like the idea of two people of the same sex having sex. That makes you gay. So if you're a man who likes picturing two women having sex and likes imagining that you're one of the women, that makes you a lesbian.
According to
queer theory.
Oh, okay. Great.
So it's a very voyeuristic, porn-centric kind of understanding of sexual orientation.
Mm-hmm. I guess that would be like where the autoandrophilia aspect comes in. Yeah.
And autoandrophilia, so that where you have heterosexual people that become enamored with the idea of being a man or being a woman and embodying that, and so they end up wanting to just kind of do that full time and to just manifest the cross-sex identity that on some level they're attracted to, and then therefore they feel other people would be more attracted to.
Did you ever see I think it was the last season of Black Mirror. Do you watch Black Mirror?
I did watch Black Mirror. I don't know if I've seen the most recent season.
Yeah, so there was in this episode, it was like two friends, and they they play against each other in like this say like the equivalent of like a Mortal Kombat video game, but it's like ultimate VR. Like there's physical sensations and all that, and the one friend plays like the regular like fighter, and then the other friend plays one of the women characters in the video, and they end up having like a love affair in the video game. But outside of that, like they're not attracted to each other at all. There's no there's no sex whatsoever. They're totally straight and all that. But in this video game, they're able to have like the most mind-blowing sex of their lives because one of them is playing as a woman and the other as a guy, and it's really well done. And it's in part, I think both there are moments that are very funny, but then also it kind of shows like the path that we're kind of on, to like being able to be into these incredibly immersive virtual realities where that could possibly be a thing where like someone I guess could be totally straight in real life and then live in this other world as like, oh, I'm a gay woman or a straight woman or whatever.
Yeah. So I think it's goes back to kind of like voyeurism. So you're saying that they're actually able to somehow actually demonstrate coitus during the game.
Yeah.
Like it's that kind of a game.
Yeah, exactly. So like, instead of punching each other in the face, they're able to, have sex with each other, in game. So.
What a world. What a time to be alive.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a fan of Black Mirror. I think they do like some really great stuff.
Yeah.
So anybody out there, go check it out. I think it's like 3 or 4 seasons.
I feel like it just keeps coming true, so I'm afraid to watch it. I don't know. I don't want to know what's going to happen.
Yeah. There is definitely that aspect to it. Well, in your professional career, like what are the types of people that you help with, your speech pathology stuff?
I've helped various people, and part of it depends on the setting. So I've worked in schools, I've worked in skilled nursing homes. And so in schools, you're looking at a lot of like developmental issues, language disorders, speech impairments. And then in nursing homes, you'd be looking a lot at dementia related care, strokes, and other illnesses. And then I've also worked in outpatient where it's generally it's mostly either children with autism or adults with aphasia is probably the bulk of my work. But then I do see a variety of people sometimes who come in with some interesting etiologies. So coming in for like muscle tension dysphonia, where just all of a sudden their neck is so tight that they can't even get noise out and they don't know why. And that can have a variety of causes, or swallowing, people who have swallowing impairments and need some help with that.
And with like strokes and stuff, do people ever get like kind of get back their ability to speak like fully?
Yeah. I don't fully is hard to say conclusively because generally there's still some indication, but I've seen really dramatic improvements, including in people where it's very long time since the injury. So like a decade or more, and they've had no progress elsewhere. But if you can figure out exactly kind of what's the deal, because sometimes you have a loss of language, but there's other problems that are making it hard to treat the loss of language because they can't get speech out. So there's like upstream and downstream reasons that somebody's not getting words out. And so it's important to work with a professional who can help identify where the problems in the system are, and who's really experienced with different kinds of brain injuries, whether they're traumatic or from a cardiovascular accident like a stroke, or there's other neurological diseases like encephalitis, which can lead to chronic issues. But I've seen very dramatic improvements with aphasia, where the person was going from saying only a couple things to being able to mostly speak in phrases in some sentences, and have a lot more communication ability than they had before.
Yeah, with the aphasia, I guess most recently lot of people have heard about the actor Bruce Willis
Yeah.
having aphasia, which is
Yeah, he has primary progressive aphasia, frontotemporal dementia. So his aphasia is not going to be reversible with
mm,
therapy. Therapy would be aimed at maintaining his function. But primary progressive aphasia is a dementia process. So it's degenerating. The structures themselves are actually falling apart.
and which is wild because I mean he's such a relatively young guy. I mean I don't even think he's 70 yet,
Wow.
or he could be. Someone could Google it, but I remember years back I saw him on Broadway. He was in a production of Stephen King's Misery, and it was just him and Laurie Metcalf played the Kathy Bates character. And Laurie Metcalf was incredible. She's such a brilliant actress, and Bruce Willis was terrible. He was just fucking awful. And there were so many questions I had. I was like, wait, so you want to do Broadway, and out of all the shows you could do, you're going to do a stage production of a movie that was a novel, which is kind of just weird. And then you're going to have, I think at the time he had like an earpiece in so people could feed him lines, from like backstage. So it's like, so you're going to do it and you're not even going to be able to like memorize your, know your lines or anything like that. So there's always going to be kind of like this delay in him delivering lines. And then, years later, you're like, oh, that makes sense. I
Yeah,
guess
maybe he was already having some symptoms.
Yeah.
Potentially.
Yeah. And do you know where, do we know where that comes from? Is there the aphasia, like why people get it versus others?
It has a variety of causes. Aphasia in general is an acquired loss of language. So language has already developed and something happened to the brain to damage the areas that are involved in language production, which mostly live on the left side. But in conversational speech, you're also having to go over to the right side to access memories and semantic knowledge and things like that. And it has to be very integrated. So you can have damage from a brain injury. You can have a stroke and loss of blood supply to those areas, causing some damage and death of the cells. People can have seizure disorders. Seizures can, over time, cause the loss of language due to damage that they can cause. There's one that it's a kind of aphasia that shows up in childhood called Landau-Kleffner syndrome. Then that's caused by a seizure disorder. So anything that can kind of damage those areas can give rise to it, or the dementia processes where there can be different ways that dementia processes happen. You can have like vascular dementia, for instance, which is where over time the small blood vessels in the brain start to die off, often due to general cardiovascular disease or diabetes, something like that. And so then the peripheral parts of the brain are not getting as much blood, and so they start to die and shrink. You can have dementia processes that are prion diseases. So prions are those like chronic wasting disease in deer. That's a prion disease. Lou Gehrig's disease, prion disease. They're little chemicals that just kind of keep killing cells and moving about the brain, but they're not themselves alive. So it's similar to like the chlorofluorocarbons in the ozone layer, but in your brain. And that can happen spontaneously from a misfolded protein. Your brain making its own proteins might misfold something and accidentally create the thing that kills it. So it's man-made horrors and natural horrors beyond your wildest dreams.
Yeah, you need to open up like a sideshow, like next to like a carnival or something, and just bring people in and just show them all the terrible things that can go wrong. Oh.
Yeah, but things can, no matter how long it's been, if you have a stable injury, it can definitely get better with intervention and help a lot of the time, or at least some sort of assistive or augmentative communication can help to bypass the injury if the injury itself is not directly treatable. But generally, there's ways of addressing even chronic aphasia where the person might have only had one or two words for 15 years. If you can just zero in on the fact that it's not just aphasia, it's often there's something called apraxia, which is where it's hard to plan your movements. And that's downstream of where aphasia would live. But superficially, it looks the same. But if you don't treat the apraxia, the aphasia is not going to get better, and the speech is not going to get better.
Yeah.
And so it's like you have to be able to think more like a mechanic, kind of, and think of it as a modular system with different parts.
Yeah. Is there anything someone can do like on the health or like, supplement side to try to stave off this stuff?
Yeah, sure, certainly. Yeah, I mean, optimal nutrition is ideal. Exercise helps to preserve those small blood vessels in the brain. Maintaining a good body weight is huge to reduce inflammation and to reduce the damage of high insulin and high sugar on small cells. Because insulin and sugar, they're kind of like little needle shaped, and so they're going around and making little pinpricks inside of the arteries, which scar over time, atherosclerosis. And so the less blood sugar and the less insulin you have is just better.
I'm gonna write that down.
The exercise itself that increases blood pressure while you're exercising, and so that can help to strengthen those blood vessels in a safe way. Avoiding smoking is good. Avoiding things that cause inflammation in general is good. Wearing your seatbelt is really important.
That sounds yeah. I could do that. I could definitely wear a seatbelt. I don't smoke. Okay, so that's.
But it terrifies me too, and like so the thing is, you can also just. I know someone not a patient, so I feel like I can talk more specifically because they're not a patient of mine, and I know this just from interpersonally, but they had a virus that we're not exactly sure which one, but it was in the herpes family, and most people have multiple herpes viruses in them already, because most herpes viruses are not the cold sore kind. That includes things like chickenpox, Epstein-Barr, but also the cold sore kind. And so at any point, that virus can decide to activate and go to your brain instead of going out and becoming a sore. And so then you might end up in a coma and paralyzed. It's an uncommon problem, but it happens to, I think, 600 people a year.
Oh, jeez. I want to.
There's no way to really prevent that.
Yeah, hopefully they got the 600 already this year, so we don't have to worry about it. If they have a cap on it for every single year. Did you all the stuff we were talking about, especially like all the brain stuff, is reminding me of Oliver Sacks. Do you know Oliver Sacks? He wrote like the books like An Astronaut on Mars, Awakenings. He was a doctor, I guess a neurologist. That's brain doctor, neurologist.
Yeah, neurologist.
So he used to cover for I guess, for like a general audiences, all these really interesting, brain damages that have happened to people. So there was one like the man who mistook his wife for a hat. You ever hear about
that's
that?
a famous one.
Yeah. So like, stuff like that. And I kind of had a joke about, the man who mistook his wife for a hat. I'm like, he can only use that excuse once. There's no way that his wife would give into that bullshit more than one time. Yeah, I mean that's so interesting. Just the brain as a this incredible organ where so much could go wrong. Does that being on that side of things and having that insight, does that explain to you? Does that help explain to you like human behavior? Like, do you ever see somebody who's online and you're like, oh, this person must have this going on in their life. They're lacking. They haven't worn a seatbelt in a while or something like that.
I definitely have lots of thoughts about people I see on the internet. So many thoughts. Yeah, I mean, when I work with people who have various speech and language formulation issues, and so I definitely will notice things that are obvious externally. So like fluency disorders, stuttering, for instance, and if that's that you can acquire stutter later in life from a brain injury also, as well as dementia processes you can develop a stutter. And so, you wonder about it. In terms of head injuries, you can end up with really complex behavioral disorders where you don't really, it's if you don't know about it already, it's not going to occur to you that this might be the reason. Your right hemisphere and left hemisphere are not symmetrical. A lot of things in the body are not symmetrical, even if there's one on each side of your body that's not truly symmetrical in terms of function. And so the right half of your sensory world is processed by both hemispheres, but the left half is only processed by the right. And so if you get a right hemisphere injury, you can get left neglect, where you just stop perceiving the left half of reality as being real. You won't notice people on the left side of your vision. unless they like move into the right side, even if they're talking to you. With more significant left neglect, they'll, in addition to having paralysis in their arm, they'll insist that the arm is not theirs and that somebody has come and attached it to them and they want it removed. And so I've gotten to interact with this directly. And so it's interesting. And so people with that kind of injury might end up, I've seen people get confused about left and right and insist that like it used to be the other arm that was paralyzed and then it switched at some point. Or they'll watch TV and then they'll express that they don't understand whether they're watching TV or they're in the TV. So there's just like your brain's ability to localize your consciousness in your body is something it's actively doing. And that can get disrupted. And so you can start perceiving yourself. You can induce this in a healthy person, I think, with magnetic resonance, transcranial magnetic stimulation, where you disrupt the part of the brain that does that, and the person, you'll start perceiving yourself as being behind yourself.
Oh, wow.
And so there's so many things that can go wrong and so many things that can arise that seem like a psychiatric problem, a psychological problem, but actually have a neurological base rather than a psychological base. Imposter syndrome, where you decide that like one or more of your relatives have been replaced by identical looking imposters.
Oh, so that's what real imposter syndrome is.
Yeah, so there's the imposter syndrome of I feel like an imposter because I'm self-conscious.
Oh man, I'm not good enough for this raise, for this job. It's like, no, that's not the one we're talking about. Wow.
Right. No, I'm talking about where you have a brain injury and you become convinced that your mother has been replaced by an identical looking imposter, and everybody needs to know because this is a serious problem.
Is it now imposters? Is there usually like a number of people that someone feels has been replaced, or is it just that like one person? Like
it's my understanding is it's typically it's somebody significant in their immediate family is typically, and it can be one person or it can be more than one person. And my theory for that is that something has been damaged in the your emotional processing, and so they look the same, but you don't feel that attachment to them, and that freaks you out. And then because you have an injury, your interpretation is they've been replaced.
Oh shit! It's interesting that you say that, because I have, without naming names, there are a couple of like extended family members that I'm after like hanging out with them, like I had family events and stuff. I feel like they've changed considerably, like over the past say like 20 years or more that I've known them. So I wonder if maybe it is something where it's like, no, they've been the same asshole this whole time. I just have sort of distanced myself emotionally. Now I'm able to look at them and be like, man, they certainly drink a lot, and they're loud, and all that. Not necessarily that they've been replaced. I'm not there yet. But a question.
This is something that would be dramatic, like right after the head injury, usually.
Oh, okay.
So it's something that might be, night and day afterwards. And then you also can get what's the other one I was going to talk about? Well, I have like a satirical gender identity called Cotard gender. It's based on something called Cotard delusion, which is a psychiatric phenomenon or neurological, where the person becomes convinced that their organs have been removed, or that they have already died in some way, or that like they don't need to eat, things like that.
Oh, wow.
And so my position is that Cotard gender is valid, and we identify as dead inside. And when people say I'm dead because something's funny, that's appropriation. You shouldn't say I'm dead unless you actually identify as dead inside.
Nice.
Our pronouns are a moment of silence. So you just stop talking.
It's like, it's a literal moment of silence.
It's a literal moment of silence for the pronouns who couldn't be here today.
Have you seen a moment of silence? A moment of silence is
respect and audible pronouns. R.I.P.
Yeah. I want to ask you one thing, and this is a personal one. So I have a 2.5-year-old and a 4-year-old, and they're about like, I think like 18 months age difference. And when they were younger, when the youngest one just kind of like first started walking and stuff, he's very much a risk taker, jumping around and stuff. And his older brother would often like push him off of like the bed. He'd be, falling into walls and stuff. A lot of him falling and hitting his head. Like, are babies' brains like, like more like less susceptible to trauma because they're like babies compared to like an adult? I don't know. No, shit.
Babies can still get head injuries, but the thing that the kids have going for them at that age is that they force is mass times acceleration. So when they fall off stuff, that it's not as
hard.
much of a force when they land, and they're often not falling from as high. But no, infants and toddlers can definitely get brain injuries. Shaken baby syndrome is the classic example of a brain injury in a child. So.
Well, I'm gonna monitor him and just make sure he doesn't think that I've been.
They are resilient kids. The younger you are when the injury happens, the better your prognosis tends to be.
Yeah. It's just like as a parent, it's like every single thing I do, there's a part of me that's like, oh man, am I fucking up my kid because of this? He fell and I didn't protect him from falling. Is he going to be messed up for life because of this? Is he going to hold this against me? And that's probably my own, neuroses, dealing with itself. But
I mean, if you have concerns that there was a, the red flags might be like vomiting, nausea, sleeping excessively after the fall. And
no, he doesn't sleep. Oh, this dude doesn't sleep. No.
Oh.
No, he's
interesting.
He's something else.
Yeah, I never slept either. My parents would have to drive me around for hours before I would fall asleep.
Well, I'll tell you what. If he grows up and he's like Exulansic, I'm cool with that. I'll be good with that. We need more of you,
Thank you.
In the world. Yeah. Sarah, thank you so much for coming and hanging out and giving me an update on all the wild stuff going on. Where can people find your work?
So I have a Substack which has essays that can't be found anywhere else. And so I like to promote that. It's just called Exulansic Substack. And then my video archive that's goes back before the Substack started is on Odyssey, as well as Rumble. But new content is also going up to Substack as well.
Awesome.